The following is brought to you by VerticalVet. Rethink your GPO.
Hello, VerticalVet family. I am Dr. Ernie Ward, Chief Veterinary Officer for VerticalVet, and it is my pleasure to welcome you once again to another episode of our Business Academy. And this week we are brought to you by our dear friends and one of our preferred partners, Neogen. And of course, they're the manufacturers that bring us the efficacious and affordable Prevecta, so if you're looking for heartworm, flea, preventive type of things, definitely check out Neogen because they've got some amazing products. But today, we're going to talk about a topic that we have covered in the past here, and we're going to continue to cover it because this is an issue that is perennial in our profession, and that is burnout and difficulty with mental health. I mean, come on, guys. We work in a stressful profession, and many times we don't have the training and background in how to cope with this. And so today we've got a fascinating veterinarian who's doing some amazing work out there, and we're going to tell you all about her organization, how you can benefit and maybe get involved if you want to, but also more importantly, some tips and tricks for how you can help deal with your clinic and maybe the potential mental health crisis that we're all facing. So today, I am super happy to bring to you this lovely, lovely veterinarian, Dr. Blair McConnel, and she's going to be talking to us about a foundation that she started up, the Veterinary Hope Foundation. But if you're not familiar with Blair, Blair's a veterinarian. She's a business executive consultant, and she's got expertise in developing and growing businesses, which is why we're excited to talk to her because she gets it, guys. She's the co-founder of the Veterinary Hope Foundation, and she is passionate about addressing the mental health struggles that we face every day. So, Blair, I got to tell you, I was super excited when you accepted our invitation because not only is this a topic that we've covered a lot, but we haven't really been able to talk to a veterinarian such as yourself. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, Ernie. Thank you for having me.
Well, I guess before we get into the Veterinary Hope Foundation and strategies to deal with, burnout and all the mental health crises that we're facing, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, what's your story? Like, how did you get here, and why is this a passion of yours?
That's all of us veterinarians have our own story, and they're all so different, aren't they? I went to veterinary school at UPenn and graduated, and went straight from there to business school. From there to working at the United Nations, and then into industry where I was with Zoetis for 10 years until I left when I had my own daughter. So it's a story that's different from many veterinarians, but what it did is it allowed me to bring resources that practicing veterinarians don't have to this issue and to this topic at hand.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing about your story is the fact that you kind of did a lot of interesting things. And so, I mean, you worked with a large governing body, to deal with lots of different people and helping with legislation and so forth. I know that's not the exact correct terminology, but you know what I'm saying. The UN definitely helps give, guidance for the world. Yeah. And then you moved into the world's largest animal health company. So you're exposed to all those tools. What did you take from those two experiences? Like, how did that impact your perspective on like stress and just the daily practice and grind of vet med?
That's a great question, Ernie. What I really took from those experiences was that we can shape our own experience, that we actually have power to change what our life is, right? So at the UN, my whole role was trying to help people who were in Iraq and who needed help with new government structures, right? And at Zoetis, I led the cattle equine marketing team, and it was all about how do we shape the market. And so really what I took from it was this attitude that if we don't like what we see, let's change it. And that's really what Veterinary Hope Foundation is about.
It really is. And that's where we get into the hope aspect. And that's what I love about the Veterinary Hope Foundations, because you do go ahead and bake and own into the whole thing, the hope, because you're right. I think too often those of us that are out there and we're feeling overwhelmed, right? I mean, life and business and family, I mean, just everything, right? And we can lose hope, and we lose sight oftentimes that we have a lot more control than we do. And I'll tell you, if you can walk away from the UN and dealing with, the issues you were dealing with in Iraq, I mean, holy smokes, guys. I mean, if you can retain hope in that. So I guess before we get into why you started the Veterinary Hope Foundation and what people can learn from that, get back into that UN and then Zoetis mode. I mean, obviously, these are big organizations with wide spanning, goals and initiatives and endeavors. So in a vet clinic, I mean, I think we're kind of a microcosm of that, right? I mean, obviously we're not trying to save the world in the UN, and Zoetis is trying to, change pharmacology and diagnostics around the world. But you know where I'm going with this, right? I mean, we treat dogs and cats and cattle, right? Or we treat whatever, and we have to deal with a wide myriad of personalities. Maybe draw that parallel a little more for me.
Yeah, I think whether we're trying to change big organizations or influence someone who's in front of us with a sick animal right in that moment, it's all through how do you connect and how do you influence, and then how do you empower them to make choices, right? And so I've built my career around helping organizations to make choices, and through making choices to get to where they want to go. And so I really wanted to take that skill set, which is the same set that practicing veterinarians use daily every single time they're with a new client, right? Or with a client. I wanted to use that skill set to change this dynamic. So the Veterinary Hope Foundation really believes we can change this about the veterinary profession. We don't believe that this has to be our future 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Right. Okay, so now let's jump into the good stuff. The Veterinary Hope Foundation. Talk to us about the genesis of that. Like, what sparked you to take action? And more importantly, what is it all about?
Yeah, so it was during COVID, and I was in a log cabin in Montana. I was living there with my 6-year-old at the time. And you'll remember during COVID, there was a lot of pain in the profession that really came to the surface. And so I was reading Facebook posts about just tremendous pain among veterinarians. And obviously there were the acute situations and the suicides, but there was also a lot of pain even before you reached that point. And I remember sitting on the couch there looking out at the snow and just tears streaming down my face as I felt the pain of our profession. And I thought, I cannot stand by any longer and let this be our truth. I have to try. I don't know if it'll work, but I have to try to make a difference. And so I called my friend, Dr. Elizabeth Chosa, who owns a clinic in Florida and is one of the leaders of the DVM Moms Veterinary Facebook group, where 15,000 veterinarians are members. And I said, Elizabeth, we have to do something. And she honestly was right at the same point. She was thinking in her own way, what can we do? How can we make this different? We both have very different backgrounds. She's been in private practice and owned her own clinic for, over 10 years, been in the trenches and understands those issues. And I come from the industry side. And we said, well, what if we joined our experiences, our networks, our backgrounds together to try and build something that'll make a difference?
Well, I love that. I love that. Again, so many stories, guys, that we've brought to you here, of course, on the Veterinary Viewfinder podcast that we do weekly, and they all have the same sort of foundation, and that is, hey, I see a problem. I think, a solution, maybe. I'm going to take some change. I love that. Okay, so what do you do? What did you set out to do? So you two are getting together. You realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot of pain out there. I want to help somehow. How did you decide to help?
Yeah. So what we did is we looked around and we said, what's available right now, and where are the gaps? Where can we be different, right? And we had lots of phone conversations with glasses of wine, her in Florida, me in Montana, and said, all right, what is the real need and what would truly make a difference? Because neither of us wanted to spend a lot of time on something if we didn't think it would actually change the situation. And so we quickly saw, Ernie, that veterinarians often are feeling very, very lonely, overwhelmed, and isolated. And unseen was a word we used a lot. So we thought, well, why don't we build small communities? There's already huge Facebook communities, right? Whether it's DVM Moms or NOMV or the several other Facebook communities, but there isn't a small community where you can really get deep with people who understand. And we reached out actually to psychologists and social workers right away because we wanted to bring the resources that they have and the skills they have to our profession. And so we met with them and we said, what can we do? What do you think will make the biggest difference and really change people's experience, not just paste over it?
Okay, so what did you conclude? So now you're talking to all these people, you're getting excited, and I agree. I mean, there were so many Facebook things that kind of popped up around that time and really swelled in popularity, if you will. But I'm like you, I've always been a bit reticent. That's not really my jam. So you're going to say, let's take a slightly different perspective. But what were some of the tools that you thought you could bring?
Yeah, so what we've ended up doing is we actually offer support groups every month. So we run as many support groups as we can fill. So at a minimum, it's 3 a month, new ones. And at the maximum, I think we have the ability right now to form 10 to 15 support groups a month. And those support groups go for 6 weeks. They meet once a week for an hour to an hour and a half each week. They're with 6 to 8 peers, and they're always facilitated by a licensed mental health professional. So one of the things we do is we bring people who are similar or having similar issues together. So for example, we've run a support group for just shelter veterinarians, or we've run one for just parents who are suffering from grief or loss of a child. We've run a support group for just livestock veterinarians because they have a different experience and have different issues to tackle. We've run one for, just many
Right.
different support groups that line up to being able to bond quickly with a group of people.
And I love that for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're sitting there, thinking, gosh, my situation is so different than other people, you're probably wrong because, again, Blair is proving that. She's saying, look, there's enough people with these, very specific needs that we can get groups together. So I love that because I think the more we can be precise with our therapy and our group interactions, the more effects we're going to have. The other thing I love about this, too, is the fact that there's a regular cadence to it. Too often people seem to think, well, I'll just do a couple of therapy sessions. That'll fix it. And it's just not that easy, at least not in my experience in the world. But talk to us a little bit about 2 things. Number one, how does it cost? Does it cost? Like, how do you pay for it or whatever? And then at the end of it, like, what about people that maybe need more? Maybe it's been 6 or 8 weeks and they're going, look, I like this. This is helping, but I want to continue.
Yeah, it's completely free currently. So we're a nonprofit. We're funded by donations from industry partners. So Beringer Ingelheim, IDEX Foundation, and Hills have all donated, among others. But we're also funded from donations from individual clinics, right? And that makes a really big difference. So it's completely free. What happens after the support group? So support groups are different from therapy, right? You're not diving into things like you do with therapy, but you also are building a community of people who understand you. So often on our very first call, people will be crying, they'll be sharing, they'll be very vulnerable, and the bonds are very strong and tight. And so honestly, what happens afterwards is they keep meeting. The support groups, we have support groups that started 15 months ago that are still meeting. They're not under our umbrella. We don't have a mental health professional on the phone with them. They're doing it, sometimes once a month, sometimes once a week, depending upon what that group wants to do. But I don't know of a support group that isn't still meeting in some way or still connected.
That
Yeah.
is powerful, Blair. That is testament to the efficacy and the need, I think, right? Because obviously people still need this. So this is done virtually, right? This is all done like we're doing right now with you guys.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you enlisted a mental health professional at the very outset. So they guide you through the first 6 or 8 weeks because those can be the most difficult. And sometimes, like you said, people can share and then other times people are a little more closed off. So I think that can help draw out those issues. Do they give like actionable, steps? Do they give advice? Do these mental health therapists in any way guide you? Do they tell you to seek additional help? Like, how does that roll, other than just facilitating and overseeing, but do they give any additional advice?
Yeah, so it's a fine line from a regulation perspective between support groups and providing mental health, which you're not allowed to do across state lines, right, with state licenses. So we stay very firmly in the support group side of things. That said, we absolutely have protocols in place on what to do if someone's in crisis, right? And how to escalate that. And the facilitator is someone with a mental health background. One of the reasons for doing that is to catch acute issues so that we don't have a bad experience, right? We want to do no harm in any scenario. But another reason is because they have frameworks that they use to help move conversation and thinking forward. So what we didn't want to see happen is a support group form and then just spin and not make any progress, right? Because what we're trying to do is actually change experiences, and that means changing mindsets and changing perspectives. So the mental health professional will come in and help ask questions or provide ways of thinking about things that maybe stretch the thinking from where people are today and how they're thinking about it, right? And they'll ensure that everyone is heard and that no one feels as though they're being that they're quiet, right?
Right. Or just dominating the conversation too. I can see how that
sometimes
can happen.
you can get it. Yeah.
How large are these groups typically?
Yeah, they're just 6 to 8 people.
Okay. Wow, that is fantastic. Yeah, and what I do love about this also, VerticalVet family, is the fact that this can be an entry point, right? A gateway to someone seeking really deeper help. Because I think that there are so many of us in the veterinary profession that are just stubborn about this stuff. Maybe we've got a stigma bias against mental health issues in general, and this can be a way to sort of gain access to that, right? And was that part of your desire? Because I will tell you, we are a profession of stubbornness that's really hurting us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things we identified is that we're so busy working in our jobs and being present for clients and pets that just the idea of trying to find a therapist is overwhelming and hard. And so we wanted to make access really easy. The mental health professionals that lead our groups are people who mostly have gone through a 500-hour certificate program in veterinary issues offered by the University of Tennessee. So they understand veterinarians, veterinary teams, and what happens in clinics. And we wanted to make that very accessible and very easy for everyone.
Wow. I love that. Again, I love everything about this. So now let's pivot slightly to number one, how if somebody's watching this and they say, I'd like to get involved, or I have a staff member I'd like to recommend, what's the first step they should do?
If they want to get involved and they want to join a support group, it's incredibly easy. All they need to do is go to veterinaryhope.org, which is our website, and there are links there to joining a support group. And then we will gather enough information to place you in a support group where we think you'll find peers and people who will really understand what it is you're going through. If they're looking to get involved, not for themselves, but for others, really what we need more than anything at this point, Ernie, is the word out. If you were to ask 100 veterinarians if they've ever heard of Veterinary Hope Foundation, I think maybe 2 of them, maybe 3 of them would say yes. So we are a brand new nonprofit on the scene, and we really need help getting the word out and making sure everyone knows that these resources are available and that they're free. And again, we are not at capacity. We have the ability to do so much more, and we just don't have awareness right now.
Boy, I love that. Any idea, or I don't know if you can even share, like the total number of people that have gone through the process so far, or involved? Any idea of like how big it is, or so forth?
Yeah, so far I think we have about 175 to 200 people who have gone through it.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
But again, we set up so that we could deliver this to over 1,000 a year. So we really would love to engage more people, and we'd love for the state VMAs to know about us. We're so grateful to you for doing this and helping us spread the word with this show. I mean, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think we need to get you on the Viewfinder podcast as well, because you're right. This is about raising awareness in general, because I think so few veterinarians know what is available. I know back during the pandemic shutdown, we did a series of these, and we had all these different mental health professionals come in and really give, coping, that kind of acute, like, here's what you should do if you're dealing with this or whatever. And trying to get people to then take advantage of all these, different therapists that were doing online at the time. And we found that hard, Blair, I'll be honest with you. And for a wide variety of reasons, but I think the biggest thing is saying it's there, right? I mean, just discovery is where you are. So I love the fact. Okay, so what's the future look like? I mean, so, obviously we'd love to get, 1,000, 10,000 people, whoever needs it, getting help. But where does it go from here, in your opinion? Do you have any long-term plans?
Yeah. Actually, we're just in that strategic planning phase right now, and asking ourselves that. I think one of the things in the long run that we can do as an organization that's different from others is we can help change the conversation around mental health. So beyond support groups, it's how do we talk about these subjects and make it more productive? Having therapists on our board from the very, very beginning changes our perspective on what our profession needs. So let me just give you one example. We hear so much about resilience and about how veterinarians need to be more resilient, and that part of the mental health crisis is because we're not resilient enough. And one of our mental health professionals, Dr. Lori Fonkin, who was at CSU for over 10 years, she got really upset and exercised, and she said, that is not right. Veterinarians are some of the most resilient people I know. And then the other mental health professional jumped in and said, do you guys understand that resilience is a trauma response?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So they talked about healing and how do we heal and how do we shift the conversation to be one of healing instead of just bucking up and
Right.
managing through it.
Yeah, Blair, I'm glad you brought up that when resiliency was being thrown around, and I'm not going to name some of the organizations, but we did a podcast on that, just saying, guys, no, just putting on more armor, fortifying, getting stronger isn't actually the answer. We need to look at the root cause here, which is all the trauma that we're enduring. So just being able to endure more stuff doesn't mean that's a good mechanism at all, in my opinion. I don't think it's sustainable, for one.
It's not in ours either. And there are real things that mental health professionals do to help people heal. And we're not talking about those as a profession, right? And so how do we shift the conversation to be one of healing instead of one of just toughen up?
And one thing too, Blair, and I'm glad because, I mean, we're two vets and we're speaking largely to veterinarians and veterinary professionals, vet techs and so forth out there. Let's be real clear on, and in my opinion at least, the fact that, I mean, we are incredibly resilient people in general. You wouldn't have gotten to where you are if you weren't. But on the other hand, this isn't about making practice easy, right? I mean, I think so many times I get these practice owners and they're saying, oh, they don't want to work hard enough, or they're just not tough enough, and we just got. And I don't. In no way am I trying to dumb down the practice or just go to easy street, because we know it. But there are ways. Number one, I think we can mitigate a lot of the challenges that we deal with. But number two, I think we can then give you strategies to help cope with those issues, because that's where we're lacking. I mean, we didn't get that in vet school. I mean, I'm older than you, but I'm sure you probably didn't get it either.
No, I certainly didn't. But part of this, I went through my own mental health crisis, right? I went to therapists for many years, sometimes 3 days a week, because I was so clinically depressed, right? So I have been there. I have been suicidal. I have been clinically depressed for many, many months and years, right? And I've come through the other side of it. And so part of what our organization is trying to do is show that it is possible to come through it. And that the path through it is healing, right? It's not denial. It's not just managing through it and putting your head down and doing it. It's not running away, that there is actually a path through it. And so what we're trying to do is share that path for anyone who's interested, and to bring those mental health resources into our profession, where we think that they will really help us find solutions that are long-term and that work.
Gosh, I love that. Well, as we kind of end today's conversation, because again, we want you to go to the veterinaryhope.org. We want you to get help if you need it, or to refer somebody. So what last bit of advice would you give that person who is either personally struggling today as they watch this, or they've got a coworker, colleague, family member who's also they're concerned about? What bit of advice would you give to nudge them to maybe take action and seek help?
Yeah, I would just say, just take one small step. It doesn't have to be forever. You could try a support group as an example, and if you don't like it, you can leave it. It doesn't have to be an enormous commitment to just take one small step, right? And we believe that it's through these little small steps that the world changes. And that's how we've gained momentum, right? And so I would say that it's not scary. There are a lot of people in the same spot. There are a lot of people who would be helped if you were to show up at a support group and share your experience. And so it's not just about helping yourself, it's also about helping others and your peers.
Gosh, I love that. And my little bit of advice to add on to everything that Blair said, which is remarkable, is don't wait for the catastrophe. I think that's really where we reside. We go, well, I'm still doing okay. I'm getting by. I'm going to work. I'm living my life. And meanwhile, you're just slowly eroding away at those mechanisms, resiliency being one of them. And you don't want to wait till you break, right? And I think that too often that's when people say, okay, now I'll take action because I've just had a nervous breakdown or whatever. Please don't. Please don't. It's not worth it for yourself and for those around you that love you. So, I would encourage you, if you're starting to just feel down, these are why I think this is when support groups benefit the most, in my opinion, Blair. It's like not when you've gone over the edge. It's like when you're just feeling like, gosh, I wish there was somebody to talk to about this. And that's where I think you have filled a void that is much needed. And I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, you're right. We're focused on early intervention. So the earlier, if you're a new grad, join a support group before it gets hard, right? If you're going through a life stage change and you've just had a child, or you're just getting divorced, or you're thinking of retiring, like we have support groups for all of those different life stages. So just come and raise your hand. And honestly, Ernie, we will build a support group around your need if we can get the people around it. It's very customized and personal. So.
Blair, what you just said kind of reminded me of something. So in 2004 at NAVC, which is now, of course, VMX, apparently I'm credited with giving like the first wellness self-care talk. And it was a bit of a struggle to get it. They gave it like the end of the day, kind of one of those things, like I'd lectured for 8 hours and like, we'll let you do the very last hour. And the topic I chose, the title was Don't Wait for the Heart Attack. And if you think about what I said then with physical health, the physiological issue, we're applying that to the psychological here, in my opinion, emotional, right? Because don't wait for the breakdown, right? Intervene early, because if you wait until and I remember one of the opening slides I had at the time, which is still true today, even though that was so many years ago, is that less than half of the people survive their first heart attack. So it's like and the reason I put this in the framework of a mental health crisis is because, Blair, not everybody survives, right? And I don't want to go there today, but or it can be irreparable, right? You leave the profession, or you lose your family. There's so many things. So I don't want you to wait for that. And again, Blair, I think that's where you satisfy such an incredible need.
Yeah. And so what we would ask your listeners, Ernie, is just to recommend Veterinary Hope Foundation when they hear someone struggling, or when they hear someone feeling just the slightest bit overwhelmed, right? Like just that, hey, have you thought about Veterinary Hope Foundation? One, gets awareness out for our organization, but two, it changes the conversation and it makes it less taboo to talk about mental health, right? So again, another small step by just saying, hey, have you heard about this resource? Maybe you should consider it. That opens space for people to admit that they do need help, or that they would like some friends, right? That they would like to talk to people who understand.
Yeah. And again, where you nailed it for me is adding hope. Yeah, this wasn't like, veterinarymentalhealthcrisis.org. This is hope.org, veterinaryhope.org. So well done on the nomenclature. I got to thank you so much for spending time. And again, we're going to do everything we can to get this message out.
Thank you.
But Dr. Blair McConnel, again, you are making a difference in the world, and I just can't thank you enough.
Well, we thank you very much. We really, really do. Thank you.
All right, VerticalVet family. That's heavy, I know, but it's important. And I want to again thank Neogen for sponsoring today's session, because Dr. Blair McConnel and the Veterinary Hope Foundation, veterinaryhope.org, is something that you need to be aware of. And that's what we're here. Because what VerticalVet was founded on, back all those years when we were sitting around saying, let's make a difference in the GPO space, it was to bring you such tools like this, right? Because we know that it's stressful out there and we want to help you navigate and manage and thrive, right? So if you've got a team member that you think needs help, tell them about the veterinaryhope.org. If you yourself are struggling with some issue of stress, veterinaryhope.org. If you know anyone that needs help, talk about the Veterinary Hope Foundation. Again, I want to thank Neogen, I want to thank Dr. Blair McConnel, and most importantly, I want to thank you, the Vertical Vet family. And if you're not a member of the family and you're watching this somehow out there on the interwebs, definitely visit us at verticalvet.com, sign up your clinic, because we've got tools like this, all the amazing stuff that we're here, and our team is just poised and so eager to help you. So again, I'm Chief Veterinary Officer Dr. Ernie Ward for Vertical Vet. It's been my pleasure. We will talk to you next time. Bye.